You start changing. Your spouse hasn't necessarily done anything terrible. You're wondering whether becoming more of yourself is going to cost you your marriage. Growth does not automatically mean you've outgrown your marriage. The real question is whether your marriage has room for two people who keep growing and becoming. Your husband does not have to want the same new career, hobby, business, trip, friendship, class, or lifestyle change that you want. You can become more adventurous while he still loves routine. You can become social while he remains more private. And that's difference. It's not automatically disconnection. Long marriages get into trouble when we quietly turn support into sameness. When we decide if he really understood me, he'd want this too. But he may not. The better question is, can I grow without being mocked, punished, controlled, or made to feel disloyal for growing? And can he remain himself without me treating his different pace as evidence that he's holding me back? A marriage does not need two matching people. It needs enough room for two whole people. This is where research gives us something useful. A 2022 meta-analysis combined 195 effects from 36 samples involving more than 10,000 people in romantic relationships. Partner responsiveness and practical support were associated with better progress toward personal goals, while negative support was associated with worse goal outcome. That doesn't mean your spouse has to become your cheerleader for every idea. Support can be much quieter than that. It can sound like, "Tell me why this matters to you. I don't completely understand it, but I can see that you do. What would make this easier for you?" Or even, "This change makes me nervous. Can we talk about how it affects both of us?" Notice what all of these have in common. They make room for the person and the relationship at the same time. What does not make room is ridicule, chronic dismissal, guilt, sabotage, or an expectation that one person has to remain familiar so the other never has to feel uncomfortable. Discomfort can be worked through. Contempt for your growth is a different problem. But I want to challenge the other side of this too, because it's easy to tell the story as if the growing person is automatically the enlightened one, and the spouse who feels unsettled is automatically the problem. That's just too simple. Sometimes when we finally feel momentum after years of feeling stuck, we move fast. We start making decisions internally before we've said much out loud. We research, we imagine, we build a new identity in our own mind, and then we turn to our spouse and announce the conclusion. And from our perspective, we've been living with this change for 6 months. But from his perspective, the conversation just started 6 minutes ago. Then his hesitation feels like resistance. Sometimes it is resistance, but sometimes he's simply trying to catch up to a version of you that he didn't know was already forming. Reinvention does not require permission, but a shared life does require communication about choices that affect both people. There's a study from 2021 that captures this tension unusually well. Researchers looked at what they call personal self-expansion, the feeling that you're growing through new experiences, perspectives, skills, or possibilities. On days when people felt more personally expanded, they also tended to report more romantic passion, partly through positive emotion. But there was another finding. People who were chronically doing more of that growth outside the relationship also tended to report less intimacy and in turn less passion. One study cannot tell you what's happening in your marriage, but it makes a practical point that I think matters here. Growth itself is not the enemy of connection. Growth that becomes an entirely separate inner life can become distance. You don't need your spouse beside you for every new experience. But if the person you're becoming never makes it back into the marriage, if you stop sharing what excites you, scares you, what you're learning, what you're questioning, Eventually, your spouse may know the old version of you better than the current one. And that's exactly the problem we talked about in the last video. A recent 2026 review of self-expansion research makes another point that's useful for long marriages. Couples can benefit from doing some novel, interesting, or challenging things together. I don't hear that as take up his hobbies or make him join yours. I hear that as give the relationship somewhere new to go. If all your growth is happening in one direction and the marriage stays frozen around the routines you built 20 years ago, the gap can widen. Try a place neither of you has ever been. Learn something new together. Change one routine. Have conversations about the next 5 years instead of only talking about next Tuesday. Let the marriage accumulate some new stories instead of living entirely on old ones. You need a new me, but a long marriage also needs opportunities to build a current we. I've been married for more than 3 decades, and one of the things I've learned is that a long marriage cannot require 2 people to remain who they were when they married. If that were the requirement, neither person would still fit. There are seasons when one person changes faster or takes on something new, questions more, or needs a different kind of life than she needed 10 years earlier. And the goal is not to freeze the marriage so that nobody gets uncomfortable. The goal is to keep asking, can this relationship update as we do? Because staying married should not require becoming smaller, but becoming larger should not require treating the marriage as something you've already outgrown before you've given it a chance to grow with you. So before you decide you've outgrown your marriage, I want you to answer 3 questions. First, is my spouse actually asking me not to grow, or is he asking to understand what the change means for us? Those are not the same thing. Second, am I bringing the person I'm becoming back into the relationship? Does he know what matters to me? Does he know why this change matters? Have I shared the uncertainty as well as the excitement, or only presented the finished decision? And third, are we willing to renegotiate the parts of our marriage that were built for older versions of us? Maybe your old division of time no longer works. Maybe retirement changes how much space each of you needs. Maybe a new business or job or friendship or caregiving responsibility changes what you can give. The answer can't always be, this is how we've always done it. A living marriage has to be allowed to revise old agreements. And here's the conversation I would have. Something like this. Something in me is changing, and I don't want to hide it from you or make you responsible for it. I also don't want my growth to quietly create distance between us. What do you need to understand about what's changing in me and what's changing in you that I may be missing? And then listen. Don't use the conversation to prove that you're right to change. Use it to find out whether there's still room for both of you in the next version of the marriage. You do not have to choose between becoming yourself and loving someone. But a marriage that lasts through reinvention can't be built on one person growing while the other person is expected to remain untouched, or on one person staying small so the relationship never changes. Sometimes the marriage grows. Sometimes after honest effort, you discover that it can't. And if you're the person who eventually chose to leave, the decision can still follow you long after the marriage ends. In the next video, we're talking about why you can be the one who left and still keep asking yourself whether you made the right decision. Subscribe and stay with me for that conversation. I'm Dr. Linda, and I'll see you in the next video.